you didn't meet them by mistake. They came into your life and shook something deep inside you. Not because they were meant to stay, but because something in you needed to wake up. Your emotions got louder, your prayers got realer, and the truth about who you are started rising to the surface. God let them in, not to complete you, but to shift something in you that had been stuck too long. Some people are not sent to love you the way you wanted. They're sent to show you what you couldn't see in yourself. They trigger emotions, uncover wounds, and push your heart in directions you didn't plan. You may feel confused by their role in your life, but what they stirred wasn't random. God uses these kinds of people to shake up comfort zones, stretch your faith, and bring clarity through discomfort. They may not have stayed, but they stirred something that was buried deep for a reason. What if their purpose was to push you closer to God, not to build a life with you? What if the stirring was the actual assignment, not the relationship? You didn't fail. The experience fulfilled what it was meant to. One, you couldn't ignore how quickly they got your attention. The preparations of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. You weren't even thinking about meeting someone new. Your focus was on staying stable and not getting emotionally caught up. But then they entered the picture, and suddenly, your heart felt something shift. It was quick, it was unexpected, and it was deeper than a surface-level attraction. You couldn't explain it, but something in your spirit recognized their presence, and it made you pause in a way you didn't know you still could. You started noticing them without trying. They didn't even have to speak much. The way they moved, the way they looked, the way they carried themselves got to you. And the odd part was that you weren't trying to catch feelings. Yet something inside of you opened without your permission. You tried to dismiss it, but the connection had already started forming, and it had your full attention whether you were ready for it or not. You kept wondering why they were able to pull you in like that. Was it emotional? Was it spiritual? Was it just curiosity? It felt too real to be random and too specific to be meaningless. That kind of pull doesn't happen without a reason. God allows certain people to appear at certain moments to reach places in you that were asleep. Not every entrance is about long-term connection. Some are about sudden awakening. He didn't let them show up to confuse you. He allowed them in to stir what had been buried under routine and silence. That fast connection was meant to remind you that your heart still responds to the things of God. Even when you try to suppress your emotions, God knows what voice will reach them. Sometimes the stirring is just about awareness. Sometimes it's just about seeing that your heart hasn't gone numb and your spirit hasn't dried out. That kind of moment breaks through your autopilot mode. It snaps you back into spiritual attention. God wanted to wake you up, and he knew what kind of presence it would take to do it. So he allowed it. Brief, strong, and unforgettable. And even if that person doesn't stay in your life, what they stirred is still working. Because it wasn't about building something with them. It was about building something in you. A new awareness, a new hunger, and a reminder that your heart is still fully alive. 2, they triggered old feelings you thought were gone. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. You thought you had already dealt with the past. You cried the tears, prayed the prayers, and tried to move on. You convinced yourself that you were okay. You stopped talking about it, thinking that silence meant healing. But when they entered your life, it all came rushing back, and you weren't ready for how fast it hit you. It wasn't just that they reminded you of someone else. It was the way they touched a part of your heart that still had pain sitting underneath the surface. You felt vulnerable around them, even if they didn't know it. You started feeling emotions you had pushed away for years, and suddenly, what you thought was closed reopened, not because they hurt you, but because their presence pulled it out of you. You started questioning everything. Did I really heal? Why is this coming back now? Why does this person make me feel so exposed? The questions wouldn't stop, and the emotions wouldn't either. God allowed this person to stir those feelings, not to punish you, but to bring deeper healing. Sometimes you can't heal something you've buried too deep. Sometimes it takes a voice, a moment, or a connection to dig up what you've been afraid to face. This wasn't regression, it was exposure. And God allowed the stirring because it was time to deal with it honestly. You weren't weak for feeling again. You were real. You were honest. And that's exactly where God meets you. The stirring showed you that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about addressing what was left undone. And you're finally in the place to do that. Their role wasn't to stay and fix it. Their role was to show you that something still needed to be fixed. And now that it's surfaced, God can deal with it in full. You've cried again, you've felt again, and now real restoration can begin. 3, they exposed the part of you that still needed healing. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. You walked into the connection thinking you had already done the hard work. You thought you were emotionally solid and spiritually grounded, but something about this person triggered a reaction that caught you off guard. You noticed how quickly you got anxious, distant, or defensive. It wasn't about what they did, it was about what they touched in you. And suddenly, the strength you thought you had didn't feel so steady. They didn't have to say much for it to show. Just being around them brought out feelings you didn't know were still inside you. You felt exposed without explanation. Old emotions, past habits, and wounds you thought were behind you started rising to the surface, and that was the moment you realized you weren't as healed as you assumed. There was more God needed to work on. It's not failure to still need healing, it's human. Healing doesn't happen all at once, and sometimes God uses specific people to reveal what private pain still lives in your heart. They didn't come to comfort you, they came to uncover you. That exposure wasn't meant to shame you, it was meant to wake you up. God couldn't heal what you refused to feel, so he allowed them in, not to stay, but to stir something that would make you go back to him. The ache they caused was the beginning of healing, not the end of it, and that's exactly what God intended. Now you know where the work still needs to happen. You know what your heart still holds on to. You know where to invite God again. This is not about being broken again, it's about breaking through, and God is faithful to finish what he started. You'll come out of this stronger, but not because of them. You'll come out stronger because you finally saw the wound you stopped talking about. And God is restoring it layer by layer. What they exposed, he will heal. What they stirred, he will settle. And this time it will be full. 4, they made you want to protect your heart again. A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. You didn't expect to be guarded again. You thought you were ready to love, ready to trust, ready to let someone in, but the way they handled your emotions made you pull back. You started building walls again without even meaning to. It wasn't just fear, it was wisdom rising up from a place that remembered pain. And now, all you wanted was safety. You weren't bitter, you weren't angry, you were just more aware of how quickly you gave access to someone who didn't protect it. They didn't handle your heart recklessly, but they didn't handle it carefully either. And that was enough to make you feel unsafe, enough to make you realize you opened up too fast. God used that moment to make you evaluate your boundaries, not because you shouldn't love again, but because you needed to guard what's sacred. Your heart is valuable, your spirit is sensitive. And not everyone deserves access to your most vulnerable parts, especially not when they haven't proven they can carry them. This wasn't about shutting down emotionally, it was about being aware of what you carry. God showed you that your sensitivity is not weakness, it's worth protecting. You can be open and still have wisdom. You can feel deeply and still have discernment. And now you know that both matter. Their role wasn't to damage you, it was to train you. They were a lesson in timing, trust, and caution. They stirred your need for protection, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. God was teaching you how to be wise without becoming cold, how to love without losing yourself, and how to care without giving your heart away too quickly. Now, you don't just feel, you pray. You don't just trust, you watch. You wait for God's peace before you give someone your soul. And when it's right, you'll know. Not because they seem perfect, but because this time God will confirm it with protection, not pain. 5. Even if they never return, you were changed. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall you not know it? You may never hear from them again. They may never call, apologize, or explain what their role really was. But even with all that silence, something in you knows it wasn't meaningless. Their presence marked a shift in you. Something they stirred hasn't gone away, and deep down, you know God allowed that moment for a reason. They didn't stay long, but the effect they had on you lingers. It wasn't about what they said. It was about how they made you feel, how they made you see yourself, your heart, and even your relationship with God. That short connection brought clarity. Clarity that you needed more than closure. Clarity that pushed you into a new season. You started praying differently, thinking differently, choosing differently. They woke up something you hadn't paid attention to in a long time. Maybe it was your worth. Maybe it was your desire to truly be seen. God used them to bring your awareness back to the things that matter. Even if they didn't stay to see your growth, they were part of what began it. Not everyone who impacts you is meant to walk with you. Some are only meant to tap something in you that changes your direction. And that's exactly what they did. They stirred your spirit. Don't think you imagined the connection. Don't second-guess the effect. It was real, but its realness wasn't about a relationship. It was about a reaction that pulled you toward healing, wholeness, and honesty. A reaction that God is still using even now. So if they never return, you're still better. Because who you are today is more awake than who you were before they came. You've been stirred, refined, and redirected. And God is doing a new thing, not because of them, but because He's not done with you yet. And what He started in you, He will finish. Not every connection is meant to last, but every connection can have meaning. When God allows someone to stir your emotions deeply, He's also revealing what needs healing and where He's leading you next. If the content inspired you, please like, comment, and subscribe to Pure Inspirational. Be blessed.